Welcome everyone to The Explainer. Today, we are fundamentally shifting your mindset. We're looking at some truly fascinating insights that challenge that super popular, everyday advice to always follow your heart and do what feels right. We're going to explore a framework that shows exactly why relying on fleeting, unpredictable motivation might actually be leading us right off a cliff while promising us happiness along the way. Instead of just winging it based on how we feel, we're going to see how building an unbreakable foundation of self-trust is the real secret. We're unpacking exactly why the most successful people in the world don't follow their feelings. They follow their plan.
So let's kick things off with a fantastic personal story from the legendary Jim Rohn. Years ago, he made this concrete plan. He committed to reading for 1 hour every evening at 7 p.m. to stretch his mind, learn, and grow. He had it all written out, ready to go. But when that very first Monday rolled around, guess what happened? He just didn't feel like it. I mean, we've all been there, right? He felt completely exhausted. The couch was calling his name way louder than any book was. He almost gave in, telling himself, you know what, I worked hard, I deserve a rest. But a small voice stopped him with a really profound question. If you can't keep this promise to yourself on day 1, what makes you think you'll keep it on day 2? He realized right then and there that his feelings were not his friends when it came to building his future. Feelings are basically just seeking immediate comfort, ease, and instant gratification. They're as shifting and unpredictable as the weather. If you build your life on how you feel on any given Tuesday, you are essentially building your future on quicksand.
Okay, let's dive into this with a really helpful analogy for how we actually should view our emotions. Now, we aren't saying you should become some emotionless robot. Successful people still feel lazy. They still feel unmotivated, and they definitely have mornings where they just don't want to get out of bed. The difference is they treat their feelings like the dashboard lights in a car. Think about it. When a light pops up on your dash saying your gas is low or your engine is hot, that's incredibly valuable information. When you feel tired, that's information telling you that you need rest. When you feel hungry, that's information that you need food. But you would never let a dashboard light grab the steering wheel and completely change your destination. You acknowledge the information, you make a note of it, and you just keep driving toward where you committed to go. Your plan is the driver. Your feelings, they're merely passengers along for the ride.
And this builds right into the stark difference between an amateur and a professional. The amateur sits around waiting for inspiration to strike. They wait until they feel perfectly motivated, totally rested, and completely confident. But because inspiration usually only shows up after you actually start working, the amateur ends up waiting their entire life. The professional, on the other hand, shows up regardless. Rain or shine, feeling incredibly motivated or completely exhausted, they get to work. And here's where it gets really interesting. Your true character isn't tested during the routine work week. It's easy when everything is scheduled, emails are flying, and your boss is watching. No, your character is tested on the weekends. It's tested on holidays. It's tested in those quiet, unseen moments when your feelings lean in and whisper, hey, you've been working so hard, just this once won't matter. That exact moment is where your future is either built or broken.
And this brilliantly illustrates what we can call the economics of consistency. Let's just look at the raw mathematics of following a plan versus following your feelings. If you have a plan to read just 30 minutes a day, every single day, by the end of the year that compounds to over 180 hours. To put that into perspective, that is enough time to completely transform your knowledge in almost any field. But what happens when you only follow your feelings? Well, you read on Monday, you skip Tuesday because you're stressed out, you skip Friday and Saturday because you're busy, and then you try to binge read on Sunday out of pure guilt. Best case scenario, you hit maybe 60 hours for the whole year, but worse than the lost hours, you've built a solid pattern of inconsistency. The harsh reality here is that the marketplace doesn't care about your feelings. It rewards consistent, undeniable results, not just the days you happen to feel motivated.
That inconsistency leads directly into an economic reality that quietly derails so many of our biggest goals, the restart penalty. Every single time you quit something because you just don't feel like continuing, you eventually have to start all over again. And let me tell you, starting over is incredibly expensive. It costs you time, it costs you massive amounts of energy, and most importantly, it costs you your hard-earned momentum. Think about someone who starts a new health journey or a new business in month 1. They hit a wall and quit in month 3 because they feel overwhelmed and deprived. Then the regret sets in, and they have to start all over again from square one in month 6. It's totally understandable to feel overwhelmed, but by stopping, they're paying a massive penalty. When you follow your plan, you build momentum, and momentum actually creates its own energy. It literally becomes easier to keep going than to stop. But if you let feelings dictate your actions, you end up trapped in this exhausting, perpetual cycle of starting over.
Now let's shift our focus inward for a second, to this profound, honestly kind of crazy quirk in human nature regarding how we treat our promises. If you promise your boss a critical report by Friday, you will literally stay up late Thursday night to finish it. If you promise a good friend you'll meet them for coffee at 10 a.m., you are there at 10 a.m. Those external commitments, completely non-negotiable. But when we promise ourselves that we'll start a side project or eat healthier or finally start saving money, suddenly those internal commitments become completely optional. We treat our promises to ourselves like mere suggestions that we'll eventually get to if we happen to feel like it. This creates a massive, silent crisis in what we can call the bank of self-trust.
Which brings us to this absolutely fascinating, hard truth. Every single time you break a promise to yourself, you are literally teaching yourself that your word doesn't mean anything. You are actively training your own brain not to trust you. Think about the gravity of that for a second. You are the one person you are with every single minute of every single day. If, deep down, you know that you don't follow through, that you bail the second things get uncomfortable, how can you ever attempt any meaningful long-term goals? You really can't. But the beautiful flip side is that every time you choose your plan over your temporary feelings, you make a massive deposit into that bank of self-trust, proving to your very own identity that you are reliable.
So how do we actually fix this? Well, we have to fundamentally understand that discipline is not about harsh, rigid punishment. Discipline is simply a muscle. When you first start working out, your muscles are weak, right? They shake under the pressure. The very first time you try to choose your rational plan over your loud, screaming feelings, it is literally going to feel like you are trying to bench press a car. It is incredibly heavy, and frankly, it's going to hurt a little bit. But the second time, slightly easier, and by the 100th time, you don't even think about it anymore. It completely stops being something you actively do and simply becomes who you are. Every single time you follow the plan, you are casting a powerful vote for your new identity.
Let's get incredibly practical here with how to start building this muscle today using what's called the 30-day rule. Look, you don't want to try and revolutionize your entire life on a random Monday morning. That's actually just your feelings looking for a dramatic, feel-good gesture. Instead, you need to start small, ridiculously small. Pick one simple commitment. Make your bed. Drink a glass of water right when you wake up. Write down 3 things you're grateful for. Make it so mind-numbingly simple that you can do it on your absolute worst, lowest energy day. And then do it for 30 days straight. Why? Because you aren't just building a habit of drinking water. You are building the foundational habit of keeping promises to yourself. If you can control the first hour of your morning and execute that tiny plan, you set the unbreakable pattern that your plan, not your feelings, is in charge of the day. Another absolute game changer is recognizing that willpower is a highly limited resource. It drains like a battery. But your environment is constant. You absolutely cannot separate yourself from your surroundings. If your plan is to get healthy, but your kitchen is stuffed with junk food, you are fighting a losing battle. Try staring down a fresh pizza when you're completely exhausted after a long day of work. Willpower loses that fight every single time. You must design your environment to support your plan. Surround yourself with people who operate on plans, not whims. Curate the books you read and the media you consume. Remove the immediate temptations from your physical workspace. Doing this isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strategic brilliance. You are literally making the right choice the easy choice. Now, even with a perfect environment, those familiar feelings of resistance will still pop up. It happens to all of us. When they do, here's a fantastic, highly practical tool to bridge the gap between feeling and action. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. When your alarm goes off and you feel like hitting snooze, or when you feel like skipping that workout you planned, simply count backwards in your head, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then physically move. Do not think, do not negotiate with your brain, don't sit there and analyze how tired you feel, just count and move. This brilliantly interrupts the established pattern of letting emotional negotiation make your decisions. It creates this tiny mental gap between the feeling and the action. And in that precious little gap, you insert your willpower and you execute your plan.
Ultimately, mastering this brings us to a total redefinition of a word we all absolutely love: freedom. Most people out there think freedom means doing whatever you want whenever you feel like it. But honestly, that's just being trapped by your impulses and your cravings. The person who literally cannot say no to scrolling on their phone isn't free. They are a slave to the algorithm's dopamine hit. The person who can't stick to a budget is completely controlled by the impulse to spend. True freedom isn't doing whatever you feel like. True freedom is having the self-control to choose your actions based on your deeply held values and your long-term plans, without being violently tossed around by every passing emotion. So, the crucial point is this heavy realization. The price of discipline weighs ounces, but the price of regret weighs tons. Life is going to demand a price from you either way. When you follow your feelings and take the path of least resistance today, you are actively choosing to pay the massive, crushing price of regret later on. Regret costs you the life you could have lived and the respect you could have earned from yourself. Remember, success isn't some giant, impossible, superhuman leap. It is simply a few simple disciplines practiced every single day. And failure is nothing more than a few errors in judgment, usually driven by temporary feelings, repeated every day.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a lingering, slightly provocative question to ask yourself today. Fast forward 10 years into the future. Will you be living a life that was meticulously built by your plan, or will you be standing in a life that you simply drifted into, pushed around by the changing winds of your feelings? The choice is entirely yours, and it starts with the very next decision you make. So don't wait for motivation to strike. Make a plan, step up, and make your next deposit into the bank of self-trust immediately today. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible material. Now go execute your plan.